Virtual IBAN providers offer a valuable service to businesses and individuals in need of fast, low-cost transfers and multi-currency accounts. But not all virtual IBAN providers are created equal or worth using. So, before choosing which virtual IBAN providers you're going to open accounts with, make sure you review the challenges, opportunities, and common mistakes covered in this video. And before getting started, if this is your first time visiting GlobalBanks, don't forget to download our free non-resident banking starter guide. It's designed to help you find and open accounts around the world, including in countries that offer accounts with an IBAN. Where virtual IBAN providers operate. At the time of filming, there are 77 countries using IBAN as their primary means for bank transfers. Out of these 77 countries, 49 in Europe, 37 of which are in the Single Euro Payment Area, SEPA, and 30 of those in the European Economic Area, EEA. In other words, if you're looking for virtual IBAN providers, there's a strong chance that you're looking for an account in Europe. Of course, there are 28 other countries outside of Europe that offer IBANs as well, including popular offshore jurisdictions like the British Virgin Islands, Seychelles, Mauritius, and even the UAE. However, given Europe's domination of IBAN, this video will focus on opening accounts with virtual IBAN providers in Europe only. We'll look at the other 28 countries in a future video. Benefits of a virtual IBAN provider. Now, if you've watched any of our past videos on EMIs, fintech, or digital banks, you'll know that we don't suggest using these platforms as your primary method for holding deposits. That being said, we've also stated that these platforms do offer individuals and businesses some value in certain cases. Well, the same is true for virtual IBAN providers. In fact, virtual IBAN providers can often be more cost-effective for foreign currency transactions, have faster transaction time, provide access to a wider range of currencies, and cater to specific client groups in other innovative ways. Additionally, while opening accounts with traditional banks becomes increasingly difficult each year, virtual IBAN providers are often easier to open accounts with, but more on that in a little bit. Next, how to choose a virtual IBAN provider. When it comes to choosing a virtual IBAN provider, there are 6 main factors that every applicant must consider. Knowing how your virtual IBAN provider ranks on these factors before applying for an account is critical. In fact, applying carelessly for multiple accounts at virtual IBAN providers without knowing what you're doing can get painfully expensive, especially if you have a business. For example, it's not uncommon for business applicants to get hit with an account opening fee of over €1,000 just to review an application before an account is even opened. So, be prepared, select your virtual IBAN provider carefully, and don't get trigger happy with applications. Your wallet will thank you. Here are the 6 factors to consider when assessing virtual IBAN providers. Number 1, customer eligibility. Number 2, risk appetite. Number 3, services offered. Number 4, license type. Number 5, limitations and restrictions. And number 6, fees. Number 1, types of customers accepted by virtual IBAN providers. Virtual IBAN providers tend to specialize in one type of client. Their client specialization can be as broad as individuals or businesses, or they may target very niche subcategories. For example, individual client subcategories may include local resident clients, EEA residents, foreigners, non-residents, or expats. Meanwhile, business clients may be broken down to a variety of predetermined client subcategories, depending on where the company is incorporated, the nationality, and the residency of the owner, the type of business, and the perceived risk level, which we'll discuss in a minute. Knowing which client types a virtual IBAN provider can realistically accept, including their subcategories, is critical. Number 2, risk appetite of virtual IBAN providers. Risk appetite refers to whether the virtual IBAN provider is open to low risk or high risk clients. An example of a low risk client for a virtual IBAN provider in Europe might be a European citizen living in Europe. On the other hand, an example of a high risk client could be a UAE company owned by a foreigner with no ties to Europe. Another important consideration related to risk appetite is price. That's because there's usually a very clear relationship between the cost of using a platform and the level of risk that that platform is willing to accept. In other words, the higher risk you or your business are, the higher your fees will be. Number 3, services offered by virtual IBAN providers. Virtual IBAN providers offer different services, usually based on different client groups that they're targeting. The most common combination of services offered by virtual IBAN providers include personalized IBAN number, multi-currency account, virtual or physical debit card, foreign exchange services, and SEPA and or SWIFT transfers. In most cases, you'll be able to spot the specific services a virtual IBAN provider is offering by checking in on their website. But sometimes it's not so obvious and you have to dig deeper for answers. Number 4, license type of virtual IBAN providers. Finally, knowing what type of license your virtual IBAN provider has can impact the services that they can offer, how safe your money is, and what their limitations are. Fortunately, this information is pretty easy to find since license holders are usually required by law to list the name of the specific license they hold on their website. But that's not always the case. For example, upon closer examination, you might notice that a lot of virtual IBAN providers are not licensed at all. Instead, they rely on the licenses and permissions that other virtual IBAN providers have obtained. Essentially, some virtual IBAN providers rent a license from another license holder, which in turn allows them to offer services. Number 5, limitations and restrictions imposed by virtual IBAN providers. Virtual IBAN providers also have very different limitations and restrictions. Unfortunately, most applicants don't realize these shortcomings until after the account is open, when they discover that a certain feature or capability is unavailable. Many virtual IBAN providers aren't clear about their shortcomings and limitations. For example, restrictions are only discussed in the fine print or if you know which specific questions to ask their support team. Here are some examples of restrictions and limitations that virtual IBAN providers might not highlight. No SWIFT transfers, no SWIFT outgoing transfers, SWIFT access is only available to pre-approved clients, limitations for the size, number, or frequency of transactions, payment cards not available to non-EEA individuals or businesses, no physical debit card, only virtual, transfers are not set in your name or company name but in the name of the provider, no transfers to or from crypto exchanges, no transactions allowed with certain countries, and more. Number 6, fees charged by virtual IBAN providers. When it comes to fees, virtual IBAN providers are all over the map. Some are incredibly affordable and charge very few fees at all. Others are painfully expensive with high fees at each and every step of the application process as well as maintenance costs after the account is open. In most cases, the fees that virtual IBAN providers charge often set around 2 core areas: client type and the risk appetite. The more exotic the structure and the higher the risk level, the more a virtual IBAN provider will charge to open and maintain an account. However, this isn't a firm rule. In some cases, you can actually find low-cost virtual IBAN providers willing to open accounts for offshore companies and more high-risk individuals and entities. You just need to know where to look. Red flags of virtual IBAN providers. Now, before discussing how to open accounts with virtual IBAN providers, let's take a quick detour and discuss a few red flags to watch out for. Now, not surprisingly, many of the red flags that applicants need to watch out for when opening traditional bank accounts apply to virtual IBAN providers as well. That said, virtual IBAN providers are often a higher risk alternative than international banking options. That's due to looser regulations, less scrutiny on their financial health, and sometimes because of the jurisdictions where they are governed. With this in mind, here are a few of the important questions to consider when opening accounts with virtual IBAN providers. Number 1. Which banks does the virtual IBAN provider have correspondent banking relationships with? 2. Does the virtual IBAN provider have their own license or do they rent? Number 3. Does the virtual IBAN provider offer a personalized IBAN account? And when you make transfers, are these sent and received in your name or the provider's name? Number 4. If debit cards are important to you, do they have a direct relationship with Visa or MasterCard or do they use a third-party platform? And are you even eligible for a debit card? Number 5, does the virtual IBAN provider have a past history of regulatory or compliance lapses? There are other questions that you should ask when determining whether a virtual IBAN provider is a good fit. However, if you are able to answer the above questions and still feel comfortable with the platform, that's a good starting point. Opening accounts with virtual IBAN providers. Unlike opening accounts at traditional banks, the account opening process is 100% remote, usually completed without ever physically interacting directly with another human. But in most cases, you'll still need to provide the same supporting documents, complete ID verification, and you may even need to attend an interview. In fact, the entire account opening process is very similar to opening an account with a traditional bank. However, the speed of account opening and reassurance that you'll never need to leave your home are major wins. Now, because virtual IBAN providers make the account opening process so straightforward, you might be wondering what the magic is to successfully getting an account open. Well, it's all about selecting the right virtual IBAN providers in the first place. To help you with this, our team has published a series of premium reports focused exclusively on virtual IBAN providers in Europe for non-EEA resident individuals and businesses. The first report, European EMIs for non-resident individuals, is dedicated to helping non-EEA residents find and open accounts in Europe with virtual IBAN providers. The second report, European EMIs for non-resident businesses, is dedicated to helping non-EEA businesses find and open accounts with virtual IBAN providers in Europe and the UK, including foreign, non-resident, offshore, and even high-risk businesses. Both of these reports are immediately accessible to members of GlobalBanks IQ and GlobalBanks Insider. All you have to do to get access to them is to become a member of either service. Start opening accounts with virtual IBAN providers in Europe and the UK. You can obviously use the information that we've shared in this video. Or you can access one of our membership services and start taking action today. Each of our premium services are designed to help non-resident individuals, foreigners, and their businesses open international bank accounts. Whether you need personal, private, business, offshore, or an account with a virtual IBAN provider, we have an account opening solution that will work for you. You can get started with GlobalBanks IQ, our international banking intelligence service. It gives you step-by-step instructions and all the tools you need to find and open accounts with top banks around the world. Plus, you'll unlock our international intelligence reports, account opening strategies, international bank database, and much more. We also have a dedicated U.S. account opening service called GlobalBanks USA, which is 100% focused on helping non-residents, foreigners, and even foreign and offshore companies open bank accounts in the U.S. It involves direct one-on-one support from our team of experts and includes access to our U.S. banking intelligence reports, U.S. account opening strategies, and U.S. bank database. And of course, there's our flagship service, GlobalBanks Insider. With GlobalBanks Insider, you'll get instant access to everything we offer, including all of the benefits in GlobalBanks IQ and GlobalBanks USA, plus our entire library of premium reports, the entire GlobalBanks database, and dedicated one-on-one support from our team of international banking experts to help you find and open the accounts you need. So no matter where you're looking to bank in the world, you're only a few clicks away from finding and opening international accounts. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.